Thank you everyone for coming to our Scholars Day presentation. Our presentation is WED Talks. It's a spin on TED Talks. It's a series of discussions about different issues that surround women, education, and diversity. I welcome all of you. Please hold all questions until the end, and we will discuss them at discussion time. Our first presenter is Heather Summer. Take it away, Heather.
All right, first we're going to look at masculinity and the ownership of that masculinity. So if you go on websterdictionary.com and you type in this word, the first thing that pops up is male. You get the ownership of the person, you get the ownership of who you are. And then we go into the qualities and what is appropriate and what is usually associated with a man. But my question is, who decides what's appropriate and what is associated with a man? And where do we get those qualities? So personally, I think of masculinity as a blue-collar person, a higher-up position, just a stronger position, power-holding man. But again, who decides that? And then we go into femininity, and we get the qualities or nature of the female sex. Not even the female person, but the female sex. So we don't get ownership of those qualities at all until the second definition. Then our ownership of who we are comes in. So on the male spectrum, they get the person, they get their qualities, they get our qualities, and then we get our ownership of who we are. So the man can move up and down the spectrum, but the women only have female qualities. And that's a little sad considering that there are women who hold power positions that are tough and are strong, that we associate with man qualities. And there are men who are male dancers, or theater people, or even men and women who don't identify them as a gender. What's their ownership in this, is my question. Then we go into what's wrong with this. First, we're gonna look at work-induced stress. So again, the white-collar, blue-collar, business, farmers, the tough men, and even you can look at sports people, the higher-up authorities, the higher-paying positions. And with this work-induced stress, since you're in such a high position, it can cause anxiety and so many other things, and that's an issue because that causes health problems. And then we go into sports-related injuries. And if you're a male and you get hurt and you're in a sport, you're not going to go in unless you're Lucroy or Rogers or someone like that, because it's acceptable for you to go to the hospital if you're hurt. But if you're not somebody like that, let's say if you're just in a high school sport or a college sport, you're not going to go in if you get hurt because that's not manly to go in. Let's say for like a broken thumb or a broken toe or a broken ankle, they're not going to expect you to go in because what are they going to do? I'm a man. Like, it just causes a lot of problems that could be avoided. And then we're going to go into shorter life expectancy because of the sports-related injuries and also because of substance abuse. If you're a man and you use substance abuse, it's coping. If you're a woman and you use substance abuse, it's you're a bad mother, you're a bad wife, you're this, you're that. So for the man, it's not more acceptable to use these per se, but it's easier for them to get away with it because they're just coping with their issues. And then we go into automobile accidents and street racing, drag racing, not using your seatbelt or pulling up to a red light with your friend and just, again, racing. Like, it's a dangerous situation and it's not a safe one to be in. And then for women, we go into unequal pay. Women get paid 73 cents on the dollar because even if we have the same position as a man, we get paid less because we are women, because we don't hit the qualities that the man gets. But again, who decides that? Who decides that we can't work at a man's position or we can't do what a man can do? And then we go into the lack of representation in the medical research. If a woman comes in with a heart attack, they're not going to get the proper treatment that they need because all the research has been done on men and men's side effects and men's issues and how do we treat the men. So if you're a woman and you have heart issues, they're going to treat you like you're a man and you're not going to get the proper care that you need. And then the only benefit for women is breast cancer because men can get breast cancer as well. So although we get that, it's still not enough. And then if we look at it from a wide spectrum, men have 5 main bullet points, and women only have 2, because if you look up what is wrong with the inequalities for man, you get a list. They are able to talk about those issues, and this is what we can do to fix it, this is what we can do to help, and so on and so forth. But then with the woman, it's, well, this might be an issue, this might be an issue, but should we spend money to do the research? Should we not? It's a touch and go issue. And why would you talk about women's issues when you can just avoid it? But I don't think we should be avoiding it or discriminating. So with the lack of representation, it's not just in the medical research, it's in the media, and Hannah Dewey is going to go more.
So I'm going to talk about the lack of representation in the media. Much of my information comes from the film Misrepresentation, and I'd recommend everyone watch it. You can find it on Netflix, on YouTube, and other sources. So first off, this is the typical magazine cover. Beautiful, thin, scantily clad woman. 47% of girls in the study said that they were influenced to lose weight because of such magazine covers. Now, telling girls at a young age that this is what they should look like degrades them and tears down their self-esteem. And we're telling them that what they look like is more important than who they are. And in this study, only 29% of the girls who went out of their way to lose weight to look like these magazine models, only 29% of them were overweight and should have lost weight. In another study, 69% of girls said that magazines influence their idea of their ideal body type. And this is one of the typical female models. On average, a female model will be 5'11" and 117 pounds, but the average American woman is 5'4" and 140 pounds. The numbers don't match. You're not accurately representing the population by presenting this woman as what every woman should look like. And telling children, young girls especially, that they need to change themselves in order to be accepted completely changes their mindset. 53% of 13-year-old girls are unhappy with their bodies. And that number moves up to 78% by the time girls are basically my age, 17 or 18. So people my age don't like what they look like because the media tells them you're not thin enough, you're not pretty enough, you're not tall enough. And you can't really change these things unless you get plastic surgery, which this woman is symbolizing with all the marks on her body. Not only in magazines do we see women being grossly misrepresented, but we also see it in movies. 16% of movie protagonists are female. And I'm sure most of us know who these women are. We have Angelina Jolie, we have Scarlett Johansson, and we have Jennifer Lawrence. But why do we know these women? Is it because they've played strong roles such as Katniss Everdeen, Black Widow, or because Angelina Jolie just directed her film Unbroken? Not entirely. We think of them as beautiful, or we talk about how much plastic surgery they've had, or how much they weigh, or what dress they're wearing, instead of what they're doing in their careers. We're focusing more on what they look like rather than who they are as a person and what their job is. And that translates into politics. The media presents female politicians in multiple different lights. They showed Sarah Palin as the ditzy, beautiful politician, and they show Hillary Clinton as the bitchy politician. So they're not even focusing on their politics, they're focusing on what they look like or what they act like. And if a woman acts more manly or masculine in her political in politics, then she's labeled as bitchy rather than having strong opinions. And both of these women, Hillary Clinton is now running for president, and Sarah Palin ran for vice president in 2012, but the US hasn't had a female leader. 67 countries in the world have, but the US hasn't. And many people argue it's because we just haven't had a viable candidate. But why haven't we had a viable candidate? Women aren't being taught to pursue politics or engage in politics because it's not deemed a womanly profession. Personally, I was discouraged from participating in political conversations in my home because my opinion didn't match that of everyone else, so I wasn't allowed to talk for the most part. And I believe it was mostly just because I was a woman. And how we talk about these politicians, or women wanting to become politicians, is misrepresenting these women as objects that we can look at and argue about rather than people who have opinions and political ideas. And Brian is going to touch more on how we talk about women.
Thank you. So, we talk about you can't be what you can't see. So these are two strong, independent women that really broke stereotypes and molds for a generation of women. On the right, there's Kristen McAuliffe, who was a school teacher who aspired to go into space, something that was really considered, not really womanly at the time. And then we have Janet Reno, who was the Attorney General of the United States. So how do we talk about women? So we've realized that women are being misrepresented, that they're being denied ownership of their sex, but how are we talking about women? So I'm going to walk us through a normal conversation about a somewhat touchy topic. So we're going to talk about domestic violence. So here we've got a pretty straightforward, easy to understand English sentence. John beat Mary. Okay? John is the subject, beat is the verb, and Mary is the object. In a normal conversation, that would turn into something like Mary was beaten by John. Now, in this one sentence, there's a radical transformation that's occurred. John is no longer the sentence, or no longer the subject of the sentence. Now we're talking about Mary. John's all the way at the end of the sentence, almost off our psychic plane. So now we talk about Mary was beaten. Wait a minute. John's gone. John's out of the sentence by the third structure. Okay? Nowadays, it's more politically correct to say the term battered. And finally, we end up with Mary is a battered woman. But what does that sentence really tell us? So once again, Mary is the subject, okay? And we're describing Mary as a battered woman. So now her entire identity is connected to something that she had absolutely no control over. My question is somewhat different. What happened to John? Why are we not talking about John? Why are we not asking ourselves, why does John beat Mary? What is it that makes it okay for a man to beat a woman? So we've all heard, we're going to touch on inappropriate humor a little bit later in this section, but especially concerning domestic violence, there seems to be a plethora of inappropriate humor that's used. What do you tell a woman with two black eyes? Nothing, you already told her twice, right? These are jokes that are commonly used in male circles that continue to promulgate this negative idea and essentially humorize something like domestic violence. So then that brings up the question, who taught John to be like this? Why is John being taught that it's okay to treat women this way? Well, it comes down to how we talk about women and men. So we have descriptive language stereotypes. So we have a male stereotype with the master of the house, right? He rules the roost, he brings in the bacon, and the female counterpart to that is the homemaker. Somewhat more diminutive, a member of the household that he rules over, so it's a subjective relationship. We talk about men in their romantic settings as studs and playboys, and these are great things to be admired and to champion, whereas we call women sluts and whores. There's a dichotomy that continually places female behavior that we would reward in a male into a negative category. Men in the workplace are outspoken, they're opinionated, they're strong, they're leaders. Women are bitchy. Men are charming. But when a woman flirts, she's a tease. A married man who has an affair is commonly referred to as a player. A woman's called a homewrecker. And then the question becomes, is she wrecking her home or is she wrecking someone else's? and then it's a sin against other women. So now we're turning women, using language to turn women against each other, which is even worse than before. So we're going to talk about how humor degrades. Some of this is a little bit inappropriate, so please follow along, or please bear with me. This is an attempt at educated humor. So we're using mathematics to make a quirky little side joke, which is fun. I like educated humor. But in this situation, we're talking about women equal time and money. So time is money, so now time equals money. Therefore, women equals money times money. Did we just make a woman a commodity? Because that's essentially what this mathematical description is saying. Money is the root of all problems. We can follow the joke along all the way to the end where women equal problems. And we see over here in the corner where it was given A+. So we're actually rewarding negative humor directed towards women, probably by a male, in everyday circulation. This picture is taken off of Facebook. This is an actual screenshot that I found on Whisper. It's a social media site where people can anonymously post things. Does not surprise me at all that this caption was posted anonymously. But again, we look at women who dare to champion their own sex and their own causes, and they're compared to Nazis. And then not even that way, as if that connotation isn't bad enough, they're calling them, unorganized or consistent or inconsistent with their views. When realistically we're putting these labels of women's issues on things when 90% of the issues that we claim as women's issues are really male issues. Women aren't beating themselves. So domestic violence isn't a female issue, it's a male issue. And we can only change that by having these conversations inside of male circles and stopping inappropriate humor like this. The last one is a joke. I'll let you read that for a second. Can you read it? I can read it if not. I don't think I have to point out what's wrong with this on the surface, but I'm going to tear apart it a little bit different. So first of all, the first stereotype that we see is a teacher asks the kids in her third grade class. So the only authority figure that's in this entire written structure is a female teacher. She asks the little boy what he wants to do, and he proceeds to give her a quite inappropriate answer for a third grade student. The interesting thing is this teacher is, nope. I don't know what happened. All right, we're good. So the interesting thing is down here, this teacher then is shocked and doesn't know what to do with a third grade student. So the only authority figure that we have is a female, and apparently she's incapable of dealing with a third grade boy. Doesn't say a whole lot for the power and authority that we would expect from a teacher. So the next big issue is, on the surface, this looks like a terrible dream, but what we have here is Kevin is able to essentially say and do whatever he wants, so we're seeing male privilege in a classroom, but secondly, he's allowed to have dreams and goals and aspirations, okay? So just space-wise, we can see that Kevin's given more than Sarah's allowed, which is a direct reflection of what we see acted out in our schools all across the nation. And then finally, we have the issue of Kevin is objectifying a woman in his statement, but then Sarah now actually wants to become the object of that affection. So she wants to become objectified as opposed to living her own life and not being connected to Kevin's dreams. So there's a lot going on here when we break this open. And with that, we will take questions for discussion.